Welcome back to DreamHack Montreal 2018. We are about ready to get into round number 2. Round number 1 already featured 4 amazing players, and we've got so many more across the entire floor of this convention, actually being held in the Olympic Stadium in Montreal. It's an absolute treat to be here, and joining me for round number 2, we have Dr. J. Jay, how you doing so far?
You know, I'm doing pretty well. I got to enjoy the event a lot. You know, it's really daunting being in this Olympic Stadium. It's just massive. The place is insane. Just looking around, looking up, seeing the Olympic rings and everything. It's really great. But you know, I came for some Hearthstone action, so I'm really excited to see what this meta is developing into.
It is a little bit surreal to be here. I absolutely agree. This time last year, you were actually playing in this tournament. So, lots changed since then.
Yeah, a lot's changed. Last year, you know, it was kind of it was a very different meta. It was more so, you know, Jade Druid was a thing, Raza Priest was a thing, but now we're seeing a lot more of these odd control decks, these, you know, even control decks. We also have things like Subject 9 Hunter, which is being brought a lot of. I think a lot of players brought that as a sleeper pick, and I believe we see already 2 of them in our next match coming up.
Yes, we actually have one of the creators of this version of the deck, Boarcontrol, is going to be playing up against Xixo in our first match of round number 2. Here you can see them getting ready to battle it out for this 2-0 record. We're going to be playing through 4 rounds of Swiss today, 9 rounds total, and then we make the cut to top 16 tomorrow evening. Boarcontrol has had an amazing year so far. He won Seed Story Cup, I believe. He's had some good tour stop finishes. His stream's doing well. He's you know, patenting decks like this Subject 9 Hunter and performing very, very well on ladder with them. And, you know, he's part of the reason why Team Fade to Karma is up there in the team standings.
Yeah, Boarcontrol is an impressive player in and of himself. It's really crazy to see, you know, how well these European players have been doing. I mean, when you have just a refined group of all these, you know, just very talented players, and they have just some of the best practice partners in the world, especially with teammates like, you know, Fino being on Fade to Karma, it really goes to show how having that group of support really helps a long way in Hearthstone. But we can't, I mean, we got to talk about Xixo, right? Xixo just got picked up by SKT1 along with Hoy and Surrender, and that is massive. He's got a huge shoulder to, you know, he just got a huge shoes to fill right there.
Yeah, he absolutely does. But, you know, Xixo, Hoy, and Surrender have been together now over, what, 3 teams?
Yeah, they've been together for quite a while.
This is an unflinching roster. They work very, very well together. Really good friends. So it's really nice to see that kind of loyalty in Hearthstone. Players really bonding together as a unit and wanting to stay together over the course of several different teams. Xixo is a name that I'm sure most of you will recognize. He's been playing Hearthstone at a high competitive level for years now, whereas Boarcontrol has, I would say, come into his own a little bit more recently. But seeing as, you know, the past is the past and we're here now, this is going to be a very close series. Xixo maybe not as much success in the tour stop circuit this year as Boarcontrol, but he does have history on his side, and we've got picks and bans now here to see if that affects these matchups whatsoever. Similar classes, some very different archetypes for these players. However, Boarcontrol with his Druid band away, that is a big Druid. Very different than the token Druid that we see on Xixo's side. Boarcontrol then with his Odd Rogue, his Subject 9 Hunter, and his Zoo deck. Xixo with his Warrior band away, that is a Taunt Warrior. He has his token Druid, his very same Subject 9 Hunter, very similar to Boarcontrol's deck, and then Xixo has an Even Lock instead of the Zoo Warlock. What do you think of those lineups, Jay?
Yeah, not quite surprised to see, you know, these bans come out here. Xixo is looking to ban the, you know, the greediest of the decks because his lineup is that full control lineup. Whereas, you know, Boarcontrol opts to ban out the Warrior because that's going to be one of Xixo's most powerful control decks. With that, you know, Warrior, it's a Taunt Warrior, so it's not the Odd Warrior, so it has access to cards like Warpath, which we know Warpath just is a card that solos decks like Token Druid and Odd Rogue and all of those aggressive decks. So the bans kind of make sense, but, you know, it's looking pretty good for Xixo right now. I think he kind of got the matchup he was hoping for.
Yeah, for sure. I do have to say, I like Boarcontrol's lineup, though. We're expecting majority Token Druid, a lot of Quest Rogue, and a lot of Odd Warrior in, you know, response to those various decks. But I like the big Druid. I think, especially in a last hero standing format, you can bring decks that have very big power spikes. And big Druid, I mean, if you're hitting Wild Growth into Bright-Eyed Scout, Nourish into Master Oakheart, that's some of the biggest power spike in the entire game. So you can bet big on some of these unusual but very potentially powerful decks in a last hero standing format. And then Zoo has been the LHS killer, you know, for 3 years since DreamHack started hosting Hearthstone Grand Prix, and it's already been having some great success this weekend. But I do like the even lock from Xixo. Even lock has had a bit of a resurgence in the last couple of weeks since Amnesiac actually finished 20th on the Americas ladder with it at the end of last season. So it's anybody's series. Who do you think's going to take it, though, Jay? Do you have any bias here, any strong feelings?
I don't think I have too much bias. I'd say I'm closer with Xixo than I am Boarcontrol. I don't know him, quite as well. But just going based off the lineups, I'm going to have to give it to Xixo. Xixo really has, the superior lineup for what he's queuing into. Now, if Xixo had something like Quest Rogue, that's completely different. Boarcontrol can kind of, stomp over that lineup. But with Xixo having access to so many control decks that are going to fare very well against the Odd Rogue and the Zulok, I have to give it to Xixo.
Yeah, I like Boar's lineup, but I think the even lock is just going to get the better of it a little bit too much for Boar to handle. The Zoo definitely could struggle, and Odd Rogue can deal a lot of damage very quickly, but if we get to those later stages with Gul'dan and Spellstone, there's nothing that even lock can't beat. So I could potentially see this one being a little bit polarized in Xixo's favor. But, again, all of these matchups, while they might be slightly better for Xixo, they're not 80-20 matchups. Nothing is so polarized that it is impossible to win for Boarcontrol. But we did see, especially in our first match of that last round, I know you were running around filming some stuff, which you guys are going to see very shortly. It was Glazer versus Purple. And unfortunately with that one, pick order pretty much determined the match. Glazer got a bad matchup in the first one, and then it went back and forth with counter picks, and Purple ended up winning in Game 5. That's just kind of the way it goes sometimes in Last Hero Standing.
Yeah, Last Hero Standing is one of those formats where you kind of want to have that counter deck. You kind of want to keep going back and forth. But I think we're getting into game number 1, Boarcontrol versus Xixo. To be Boarcontrol on that, I guess, Subject 900 is the best way to call it right now. And Xixo on that token Druid. Xixo's got a very powerful opening hand. You saw him keeping the mulligan and Nourish. I think Nourish is one of the most important cards in almost every single matchup. I would say it's almost an auto keep in most of those matchups because Nourish allows you to either replenish what you were missing or it allows you to get to the ultimate infestation, the spreading plague. Those very powerful turns that token Druid is looking to do. And now you see right in the hand. That's why we call it Subject 900, because there's a Subject 9 in it.
It truly says it all. Yeah, you're absolutely right with Nourish. If Druid had weaker recovery mechanics, I don't think Nourish would be as strong of a keep in the opening hand. But even against the most aggressive decks in the game, like Odd Rogue and Tempo Mage, you can't afford to Nourish on curve for mana, knowing that you have cards like Branching Pads and Malfurion and the Pestilent to back up that turn that you are taking off to gain extra mana crystals for later on in the game. And with Subject 9, Hunter has gained something that it really lacked for pretty much the entirety of its Hearthstone history, and that's a large form of card draw. With one card, you can draw 5 secrets at a time, which you can then use in combination with Secret Keeper or the Emerald Spellstone, but more importantly, it thins out your deck. It gets those secrets out that you don't want to be drawing so you can find your more powerful late game like Deathstalker Rexar.
Yeah, Subject 9 really does add a lot. And then there were a couple of interesting decisions just to be brought in the first couple turns. The first one was Boarcontrol in the tracking took Houndmaster, understanding, he doesn't have Spellstone upgrade with the secret if you were to take that one. Explosive, although it would be better later on against this deck, it's not that powerful, so that way you can curve out. And then you saw Xixo coin Wild Growth. Now, typically that's a very counterintuitive play, because when you coin Wild Growth, you go to 3 mana, and there's not that many 3-mana Druid slot cards that you would want to play. But the reason Xixo went for that is because he had the second Wild Growth. And if you go for the coin Wild Growth into Wild Growth, you get to Nourish quicker than if you were to wait, essentially. And you would get to it, that turn faster, and it would fill out your mana curve, essentially, a little bit better throughout the course of the game. So very counterintuitive play for the most time. I don't typically recommend coining out the Wild Growth unless you have some setup like coin Wild Growth into something.
Yeah, the last thing that you want to be doing as a Druid is taking a turn off just to hero power,
yes.
Especially when you could have manipulated your turns a little bit more effectively with the use of that coin. But here we can see it's not going to be a problem for Xixo. He just needs to get on the board very quickly so he can start to combat the early minions from Boarcontrol's Hunter, because we're seeing a lot of different variants of Hunter, but this one is a little bit more mid-rangey and does have more minions in the early game than a Hunter deck that's relying solely on Devilsaur Egg and Spider Bomb and Death Rattle activators. This is going to be more just curve out from turn 1.
Yeah, and you saw Xixo there, instead of going for some kind of Nourish play. A lot of times with this Druid deck, the way you lose this matchup is by your opponent just kind of steamrolling that early pressure and pushing in a lot of damage and then finishing the game off with either the secrets or the wolves or just kill commands, something like that. So you saw Xixo, instead of going for a nourish play to either draw to get more resources, just, you know, played out the Giggling Inventor, made sure to, you know, protect himself as much as possible. If he wanted to, he could follow up with a Savage Roar to try and clean up the board as much as possible. I think the swipe is going to be much better here. It can clear up the entire board if he chooses to do so. But the real question is, does he want to take the 6 damage? And I don't think he does, especially when you have the Divine Shield onto the Annoyatron. But that's going to be a tough question to answer right now, especially because, you know, that Divine Shield could come out to help him later on.
This is an interesting matchup. I have more experience on the Hunter side of things, and in my personal build of this deck, I do like Savannah Highmanes and Kafrina at the top end, so I play a little bit of a heavier build than I think we're seeing here from Boarcontrol. So I think it's a little bit better when you have some of that top end. For Boar, I could see this one being difficult after Xixo has gone Coin Wild Growth into Giggling. I think as the Hunter, you kind of need to hope that the Druid doesn't have all of the ramp in the world, because if they do, then you don't have enough time to put on that early pressure and to get through all of your damage before the Druid hits these power turns like Malfurion, like Ultimate Infestation, Spreading Plague plus Soul of the Forest, are just really too powerful for the Hunter to deal with in the late stages of the game. You do have these secrets, which are really good disruptors, but the Druid is happy to just take some turns off from attacking and not find out exactly what secrets are in play.
Yeah, to be honest, from the Druid side, you don't even really ever have to proc those secrets if you choose not to do so. If your opponent's not really playing any pressure, you honestly could just hero power for armor until you assemble enough pressure on your own. I mean, the only time that really they get the pressure on is through that Spellstone that we see Boarcontrol has, and that's something that just Subject 9 does so well for this deck, is that it allows it to get that refill that typical Hunter decks did not have in the past. And we can see here, just with the Subject 9, is able to develop 2 secrets, buff up this Spellstone, and the Secret Keepers in one turn. Xixo's got to be a little wary right now if he wants to get through this one, but having the Nourish in hand, he does have the refill.
These Secret Keepers for sure are very threatening on board with 2 more secrets, which Xixo knows that Boarcontrol has in hand. Suddenly these are punching through all of the Scarabs. The Saronite Chain Gang is a nice inclusion. This is an updated version of Token Druid. You're not playing Violet Teacher and Oaken Summons. Instead, it is Saronite Chain Gang and Strong Shell Scavenger. So a little bit stronger in the mid stages of the game. But seeing as Xixo does not have Strong Shell Scavenger, doesn't have Spreading Plague, doesn't have Whispering Woods, his hand's a little bit weak right now, and he might even be forced to draw with this Nourish.
Yeah, he's on 8 mana now, so I don't think he's too worried about the draw for the Nourish. I think that's the least of his problems. I think it's more so just trying to figure out how to answer this board while trying to fit in that Nourish. Especially because
he just doesn't have the time.
Yeah, exactly. You have to answer this board right now. You don't really have that time allocated. You have to, you know, dedicate the Spellstone, maybe even a minion here. One of the biggest issues is you want to hero power for attack because, you know, the 2 attack from Savage Roar really isn't clearing anything up. So it looks like it's just going to be some easy trades, Spellstone used, and then some cleanup on the Secret Keepers. But he doesn't have Spreading Plague for these Wolves about to come down next turn, and if those Wolves go rampant...
Some rabid Wolves, Jay.
I'd be terrified of rabid Wolves. Nothing scarier than Wolves, not even Sharks. If it was a board of Bear Sharks,
well,
I wouldn't be scared.
I mean, I'm not afraid of Sharks.
I'm scared of Wolves, though.
Just don't go in the ocean.
But Wolves, you have to go on land.
That's true.
The Sharks of land.
I don't have to leave my bedroom, Jay.
A wolf can get in there if it wants to. A shark can't.
Whatever you say.
You ever heard of Little Red Riding Hood?
I have.
That was scary.
I'm familiar with the story.
That's not a fairy tale. That's a horror story.
I do want to say I think Boarcontrol actually played this game very well, and it sort of worked into his advantage that he didn't have secrets until after the Subject 9, because one slight fallacy with this deck that I think a lot of people sort of find themselves in is playing Secret Keeper early on to try and then go with secrets on curve. And yes, that's good, but a 1-2 is a lot easier for a Druid to deal with than a 3-4 or a 5-6. So I do think it is actually really intelligent to save that Secret Keeper until you can buff it up maybe twice in a single turn, get it to that 3-4 spot, and then suddenly the Druid is having a really difficult time actually killing it off.
Yeah, however, the issue for Boarcontrol right now is, although he's been playing pretty well so far, maximizing his chances, you know, he's still not in the clear right now. If Xixo just finds Spreading Plague, this game can almost be over with that because there's no great way for Boarcontrol to get through on that. And you see Xixo there capitalizing on the branching pass, not gaining armor, not not saving it for the Spreading Plague, but drawing to try and maximize his chances at the Spreading Plague. Because if he finds that, I think it might just be game over for Xixo at that point. That's too powerful of a turn for Boarcontrol to come back on.
And that's a massive benefit of playing Strong Shell Scavenger again, because you can, with 10 mana, play Spreading Plague and Strong Shell Scavenger immediately, and now suddenly Mossy Horror doesn't clear up your board.
It's almost like a third branching path in a way.
Exactly. Whereas before, we didn't have access to that immediate buff, and plague boards could be killed with Mossy Horror, and then lethal damage could be dealt with wolves on the board. In this scenario, with that Strong Shell, that's not going to be the case.
And you see Boarcontrol there just being as aggressive as possible. No real reason to trade up minions. That's not what he's looking to do in this matchup. He is just looking to punch Xixo in his Malfurion face enough times so that he dies. And that's the goal of Hunter. And that's almost been about every single Hunter deck in history, except for the most recent Death Rattle Hunter. You just want to be as aggressive as possible.
The hero power naturally lends the Hunter class to that aggressive identity. I do think that there is still a lot of unexplored potential with Hunter right now in particular. We have two very distinct decks with this not Recruit Hunter, Subject 9 Hunter, excuse me, and then with the Death Rattle Hunter. I do think that maybe there's a blend of two archetypes that could be quite powerful as well. Keep in mind, we're only about a month into the Boomsday Project meta, and there's still a lot that has yet to be explored. And Xixo still failing to find that Spreading Plague. He's through the majority of his deck, so this is really quite unfortunate for him here.
It is unfortunate, but he does have a build your own Spreading Plague in the form of 2 Serenite Chain Gangs. It's not as effective, it's not as powerful, but could take another value trade, use his hero power to clean off one of the wolves if he chooses to do so. Or, I think we'd rather clean off the Cobra, because obviously that would be a little bit more detrimental if he does draw into that Spreading Plague. But he's really thinking here about how much he can afford to put onto the board. Is it better to, make 2 larger taunts, or to go wide with taunts and take the value trades? There's still some swipes in the deck, so he could pick that up. He's going to be evaluating all of these decisions right now, but he needs to make a move. Rope is burning.
It's a lot to think about in not a lot of time. Some turns are very, very straightforward. This is not one of them. And Xixo's actually going to go ahead and just commit this Strong Shell Scavenger, try to challenge the board fully with these Saronite Chain Gangs, but this does then leave him without a Strong Shell Scavenger if he finds Spreading Plague off the top of the deck. So definitely not an easy decision to make, but I do think this was his best play that turn.
Think so as well. And then even if he doesn't save the Strong Shell Scavenger, he still has access to Spreading Plague, which can soften up the board enough to where, he's not that worried about it. As long as these wolves don't get through, I think he's happy.
And now Xixo is just within range of a Kill Command and a hero power if he were to spend his full 10 mana this turn and not armor up. Oy.
Oh, this is, you can take a trade with the Tyrant, hope it's not something like a Freezing Trap, or some other, board-centric one. We see that the Snake Trap finally got committed. And Boarcontrol does that, realizing that, right now he does not have Spreading Plague. And if he ever draws Spreading Plague, probably lose this game. Or probably have to burn over the top of the Plague.
Yeah. This matchup does not usually look this good from the Hunter side of things. It certainly can be very in favor of the Hunter with an on-curve Emerald Spellstone and some powerful Secret Keepers in the early turns, but it's very rare that you have a Druid that draws through the majority of its deck and just doesn't find Spreading Plague. It's really unlucky that Xixo hasn't gotten it.
It is unlucky, but, Boarcontrol isn't in the clear just yet. Still doesn't have, quite the tools. Picks up another Eaglehorn, but that's really not what he's looking for right now. He can keep playing minions, but eventually, Xixo's been through a lot of his deck right now. He is just one draw away from hitting that Spreading Plague. Granted, what's left in the deck? I think it's just Spreading Plagues at this point. He's seen so many other cards.
Yeah, 2 Plagues, some Whispering Woods, another Soul of the Forest. So at least 5 cards left. But not probably too many more than that.
Another Ultimate Infestation. Maybe he can honestly live to the point where, maybe he draws a swipe and he swipes up the board, and then Boarcontrol really doesn't have that great refill. He's got, a couple of minions, but those aren't as daunting, especially because he can kind of hero power around them if he picks up a swipe.
Well, still another turn for Xixo to try and find that Spreading Plague. He does have the ability to give them all Death Rattle and then potentially swing for lethal with the Savage Roar on the back, but he does also have another Branching Paths, I believe, in the deck. He used
Could
the
draw
first one
for
to
that,
draw.
gain 24 armor, or gain 12 armor, and hope to live that way as well.
Yeah, so
Swipe is
a
another
couple ways
draw.
to extend this game.
But I don't even think Swipe would save him at this point, because he would swipe, trade into the Bear Shark.
Ooh,
Ultimate Infestation,
that's
that does not
gonna
keep
be
him
enough.
alive.
He goes to 10. He can clear off 1 wolf. That's still 10 power on board, or 7 power on board because he
7 power
kills another
plus,
with the ultimate
you know,
infestation.
the weapon, the hero
Yeah.
power. He can nourish for gain 12 at this point. There's that spreading plague. There's both of them.
That's just going to be game. Xixo does not have a way to survive here, and Boarcontrol putting on a really large amount of pressure in the mid stages of the game with the Secret Keepers and the secrets off of Subject 9. And you could see after he played Subject 9, his draws just were so good. He found both of those spell stones, was able to power them up, and then because Xixo didn't have Spreading Plague, Boar was able to leverage that that tempo on board. But it very easily could have gone in Xixo's favor.
It really easily could have just one Spreading Plague away, but that just goes to show you how powerful of a card Subject 9 is. Subject 9 not only just gave the refill that the Hunter needed, it also just, you know, made sure that the next couple of draws off the deck were very powerful. We saw Spellstone, we saw, you know, the Eaglehorn Bow, we saw, you know, Bear Shark, just things to do each turn to make sure that, you know, Xixo was always on the back foot, always needed that one card, and that win is very crucial for Boarcontrol right now, especially in an unfavorable lineup. Him getting that win means that, you know, it's going to be easier to try and take on the lineup, especially because Token Drew was looking very good against, I mean, his whole lineup except for Zoo, and he didn't hit that matchup.
So now Xixo has the opportunity to counter this Hunter from Boarcontrol. I would think he's going to go with his Even Warlock, just because the removal lines up so nicely against all of the minions from Boarcontrol. You have Hellfire for the Wolves, you have Defile for those wide, smaller boards. Cards like Snake Trap can then allow for a very powerful Defile as well. So I would think this is going to be an even lock from Xixo. And then I do see the potential to find consecutive wins with this Even Warlock. Even though in Last Hero Standing, traditionally the player that gets the first win is very favored in the remainder of the series, I think this Even Lock could break that.
I think so as well. I mean, this Even Warlock lines up fairly well against the entire lineup for Boarcontrol, outside of maybe the Odd Rogue. The Odd Rogue will, you know, be a little bit favorable against the Even Warlock.
Bilespine's a very good card.
It's a very powerful card. But one thing Xixo has going for him that I think he's not really too concerned with this series in its entirety is that he has the Hunter of his own. As long as he gets through this matchup and can win this one with the Warlock, which I would say is Warlock favored, his Hunter will be able to pair into Zoolock and the Odd Rogue, which I would say, you know, is Hunter favored, because the Hunter has so much removal, it has so many tools to put on a lot of pressure that Zoo and Rogue cannot deal with, and overall it's just a very consistent deck at what it does.
We have turned our curse.
Yeah, a couple of interesting matchups remaining here. This one is certainly not cut and dry, especially since Boarcontrol has a phenomenal opening hand with the Dire Mole into Crackling Razor Maw and the tracking to search for whatever else he might need going into the mid stages of the game. Xixo, however, does find that Hellfire, so the first large board will be destroyed pretty easily.
Yeah, Xixo opted to keep the Mountain Giant in the opening hand. I would say Mountain Giant, you know, against typical Spell Hunters, it was extremely powerful because there was no great way for Spell Hunter to deal with it outside of some kind of Hunter's Mark play. But in this deck, it's a little sketchy, and the reason I say that is because this deck doesn't do the same thing as Spell Hunter. It gets onto the board faster, it has those minions, and if you're playing a Giant when you're at half health, that gets very scary. But one thing that even Warlock needs to have is some kind of pressure. You know, a lot of these decks, they can, you know, have this great hero power and they can constantly remove the board, but if you're not putting pressure on, you're ultimately not winning the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Xixo really only has, you know, the very straightforward game plan of the Even Warlock to go with, but fortunately it is a very good game plan in this matchup. And Boarcontrol does actually hit Poisonous onto that Dire Mole. There's no Hunter's Marks in this Hunter deck, so you do need a way to clean up that first Mountain Giant and just hope that there isn't a second one. And with only one Freezing Trap in the deck as well, it can be much more difficult to get rid of that first Mountain Giant if it does come down on curve, and we will see that happening here for Xixo. But again, that Dire Mole would just do away with it very easily. So Xixo will have to deviate here. To what, though, is the question.
Yeah, that was a very powerful take from Boarcontrol in the early games, just understanding that, you know, it wasn't the most aggressive option against Warlock, but he saw, based off his hand, that he didn't really need an aggressive option. What he needed was an answer to Mountain Giant, and if he had that answer to Mountain Giant, the game would have been so much easier from that point. So Boarcontrol taking, you know, that one option right there kind of set up for the entirety of how this game is going to pan out.
And because Boar is playing this specific version of the deck, his deck isn't bogged down with a bunch of Death Rattle activators and recruiters. He does have room for double kill command. So you can burst a Warlock from pretty high life totals. And Warlock, once they get this far behind in the early game, yeah, they've got some recovery tools, but they usually come a little bit later. Blood Reaver Gul'dan is not going to be able to be played for quite a while now. Xixo's already sitting at 12.
Yeah, this is looking pretty scary for Xixo. He had to use one of those Hellfires, which he typically you save the Hellfire just for the Spellstone, but he had to use it just on a Crackling Razor Maw and a Dire Mole, and he didn't even clean up the Misha. And now he's just got to think, you know, is it worth Spellstoning to try and gain some life, try and take the board back? Is it worth just, you know, playing a taunt and saying, you know what, you don't have anything that can deal with this? It's a very difficult turn. I mean, Hellfire is a possibility, but the issue with Hellfire is you're just killing yourself at that point.
Yeah, Xixo's dead if he Hellfires.
Yeah.
Boarcontrol has exactly 9 with the Kill Command, Leok, and the Hero Power. And Xixo does have a couple of interesting inclusions in this deck. He's got one copy of Shadow Flame. Sometimes we see Shadow Flame, sometimes we see Twisting Nether, and even Warlock now. He has one copy of Bone Mare as well.
I would typically say, as for these even Warlocks, you know, Shadow Flame is becoming a more popular card. One of those reasons was because people started to play Rin the First Disciple, and Shadow Flame allows you to clean up your Rin to play around silence effects, which is very important because typically you would have to save a Spellstone in order to do that for even Warlock. But with the addition of Shadow Flame, you can kind of do that against Warrior and not worry about the silence. And it's also just, you know, a cheap removal tool if you need to clean up the board somehow.
All right, so no lethal for Boar, but he is going to put Xixo down to 8. He had to use the kill command, however, to be able to keep that Misha alive.
I mean, it's kind of looking fairly solid for Xixo at this point. I know he's, you know, low on life, but he's going to be able to gain a lot through the Spellstone, and he effectively took board back against Boarcontrol, and all Boarcontrol can really do now is try and hero power his way to victory.
Yeah, that was a very fast swing around, especially considering how dire things looked for Xixo just on that last turn. Now we do have to note he doesn't have any other life gain in hand right now. There are Shroom Brewers in the deck. There's still Blood Reaver Gul'dan at the top end, so there are still incremental points of healing that he can find that can keep him in this game and keep him out of range of second kill command plus hero power.
And one of the awkward things about this Hunter deck right now is we saw how powerful it was with its refill in the first game. But in this game, if you don't have that Subject 9, and you're just top-decking awkward secret after awkward secret, you're not ultimately winning the game that way. And we did see a kill command get picked up. He's almost there. Not quite, but he's almost there.
Xixo wisely refraining from attacking with that Vulgar Homunculus. It looks like a beautiful trade into the Crackling Razor Maw, but there is a Venom Strike trap active.
And that's the one thing about this Hunter deck that a lot of players neglect to remember is that, you know, it does have very powerful secrets, but if you just play around those secrets, this deck becomes much easier and easier to beat. If you're just playing around the secrets all the time, what does the deck really do? It doesn't really do much. So Xixo just wisely playing around every secret, and there's no reason to attack there. They're going to have to attack for you. Even with the Houndmaster Shaw on the board, it can be scary at times, but, you know, just let them do it. Why not? Secrets only proc on your turn.
Competitive spirit.
Quickly.
That's not in rotation for standard.
I just like
Checkmate. I beat Cora in the fact contest.
I mean, I'm still technically right.
You are right, and I'm wrong, but...
Second kill command having to, again, be used to clear up a minion. And now Boar's damage from hand is non-existent.
Still has that hero power, though. and you needed to clean up that giant. If you kind of leave the giant in its state, it can get very hectic and out of control. And there we see, you know, another taunt going to be played in the way. This hero power is going to get there. Right now, Xixo doesn't have any heal. And Xixo also doesn't have any pressure. So at this rate, I think Boarcontrol could just get there with hero powers. It's going to be close. But he could.
It's possible.
There's a Shroom Brewer, though.
Less possible.
That's 2 more hero powers Boar's going to have to do. Boar's got a lot of work.
What Boar does have going for him is time. Xixo is not going to want to attack face while there are still secrets active. He doesn't want to, you know, find out what they are and find out that it's particularly bad for him.
Yeah, that's the one way you lose right now is just not playing around those secrets and something bad happening. But picking up that Shroom Brewer was a huge, huge pickup. Allows him basically 2 more turns through that hero power to put up enough pressure in order to end this game.
And you can see how even though things looked very poor for Xixo in the early game, the Warlock does just have more staying power than the Hunter. Especially in this version of the deck. If Boar doesn't find Subject 9 to weed out those secrets, if he doesn't find Deathstalker Rexar, he can really struggle to draw the better cards in his deck. And honestly, once you get this late in the game, the only card that matters is Deathstalker Rexar. There are really not a lot of other cards that do much. This is more of a mid-rangey Hunter build.
With Deathstalker Rexar picked up off the top, though, that's going to be a huge draw for Boarcontrol. Going to allow him to try and create some kind of beast to push that final damage. You saw him actually not even go for a hero power there first. That tells me that he wants to dedicate to this freezing trap.
That is
is that what I think it is?
It's a 7-10 with stealth and charge.
Imagine if he had fit that hero power in.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure Xixo would have. Most likely he's accounting for Xixo having some kind of taunt to put in the way. But if he had fit that hero power in, this would basically be lethal next turn.
Is there an explosive trap back? I don't think so.
No, the one already
Venom
procced
Strike.
earlier. It is Venom Strike.
Oh dear, if Xixo does not put down this Vulgar Homunculus, then Boar could have had lethal with a hero power. I think it's got to be played. There's no 4 damage direct from the Hunter. They can get Life Drinker.
Yeah, Life Drinker is about the extent to it. I guess they could technically get the other one, the Emerald Reaver, could do 1 damage.
Yes,
so there could be a beast that had, the first one could have Life Drinker and the second one could have Emerald Reaver.
That's fair.
That's one of the ways. But honestly, just playing
Slam this Rhino.
Slam the Rhino, and then you don't even necessarily have to attack.
Oh no, I'm not
You
attacking.
could just sit it there. It's stealth right now. You could just build another beast next turn, get through the taunt, and then push through that damage.
Well, Subject 9 is a beast as well.
Yes.
So you can, at this rate, play the Rhino this turn if you're not dead, because it's looking like Boar will be alive. And if Blood River Gul'dan is not played, then Subject 9 can run in. You can hero power build another beast. Maybe that goes in. Find something with poisonous. If it has charge, that's very powerful. Things are looking decent for Boar if he can stick this Rhino here and Xixo doesn't find Gul'dan and he's not playing Twisting Nether.
No, I don't even think he can answer with some kind of Shadow Flame play.
Even Gul'dan just brings up, I think, another Vulgar Homunculus.
But I mean, honestly, that might be enough in this spot. As crazy it is as it sounds, bringing up another Vulgar Homunculus might be all Xixo needs right now. It also brings up a Hooked Reaver that doesn't have taunt. It'll just be a 4/4. But just putting back that pressure. Dread Infernal is not the draw he was looking for.
He's going to have to tap for it. He's dead if he doesn't.
I mean, what is he tapping for at this point? Just the second Hooked Reaver?
Yeah, I think so.
Even then, you could still just die
still
to
dead.
a Life Drinker minion.
Oh, you die to any chart. No,
No, you
any
wouldn't, 'cause you'd have the Vulgar
chargers.
Homunculus.
It would need to be a charger that has 4 attack to get through the Homunculus and then something with 2 attacks.
So Subject 9 plus any created Snow Flipper Penguin minion, essentially.
Yeah, any minion that is 3 mana or less.
And cute. There's a strong
Sure.
requirement.
We'll call that a
and-
prerequisite for ending the game. Kill him with cute.
Okay.
That's actually probably the
Could
best draw.
find Timberwolf, though. Timberwolf plus another minion would get him there in the end.
Yes,
Because
it would.
Timberwolf would buff the minion up to 8 attack, so...
Any, like a Stone Skin Basilisk for us, plus Snow Flipper Penguin as well.
Any kind of, you're right, any kind of poisonous minion would do it as well. I think you start off with creating the beast and evaluate
to.
from there.
That's the way the boar wins the game this turn, and if he doesn't win this turn, he loses this turn.
He could also Subject 9 pick up the second explosive trap.
Ooh. It's not enough.
What was the first one picked? I just missed it.
I think it was Hungry Crab.
Hungry Crab. He wanted something cheap just so he could get through.
He wanted something small.
Yeah, Hungry Crab's not quite enough. I will say, though, I'm pretty sure there's another explosive trap in the deck, if I'm correct. Could just take that explosive trap and equip it.
And just wait.
And just wait. There we see the explosive trap, and I think that's what he's going to go for. Because right now, Xixo doesn't have healing in his hand.
No.
And he cannot attack face.
He did not hit Death Coil. He does not have Blood River Gul'dan. There is, however, still Gul'dan and another Shroom Brewer in the deck, I believe. Did he play both Spellstones already, or just the one?
He's just played one Spellstone.
Just the one?
There's another Spellstone in the deck.
Okay, so 3 sources of healing that Xixo can draw into.
But he can't tap to find any of those cards.
I think Boar's got to keep this Rhino stealthed.
I think so as well.
Whoa.
Looks like he's not even going to go for it. I think he's
Oh,
going
it's
to take the
Lifesteal.
Lifesteal. Yeah.
He took the Scale Hide.
I think he just didn't want to resort to committing to that explosive trap play because he automatically loses to any of those cards on the spot.
And Xixo would have drawn into it.
That was good recognition from Boarcontrol there. I think a lot of players would have gone for that explosive trap. But him understanding, hey, look, that's not the winning play. The winning play is to clear up this board, maybe reserve it if they still don't have the card, and then try and get through the board in the end. Because right now, Xixo has to clear this board state somehow. But most ways to clear the board state either affects his own board or is so awkward that it doesn't matter.
And Boar still does have plenty of Build-A-Beast outs for lethal.
Yes.
So Xixo is going to have to... He can't Spellstone and put up a taunt. This does buff that Spellstone to deal 5, heal 5, which puts Xixo at 6. So the range now for Boarcontrol to end the game is smaller. It's got to be a Tundra Rhino plus
It's going to be Tundra Rhino. It's going to be a
else.
Stone Tusk Boar. That was a snap pick. But these minions are so weak. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Stone Tusk Boar off the snap pick. Because he snap picked that first one. We missed it. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a Stone Tusk Boar, but none of these are strong enough. All he needed was something with 5 attack.
Yeah, he does have a Houndmaster in hand. Now it's King Mukla.
Oh, it's King Mukla. Huh. I was not expecting that. Maybe he was just trying to find something cheap enough to taunt up.
Interesting. Okay, well, continue gaining life. Again, he's out of range. Again, Xixo does not find Blood Reaver Gul'dan. And if Xixo wants to clear up this King Mukla, he's going to heal Boar further unless he silences the Mukla.
I mean, if you're Xixo at this point, do you just say, forget the Gul'dan, go for a giant Army of the Dead play?
How big is your Army of the Dead even
You've got Ken
potentially
Greymane,
be, though?
maybe a secondary...
Giant?
There's a second Giant.
There's a Hooked Reaver.
There's a Hooked Reaver. There's a Bone Mare.
Yeah.
That's about it. I'm looking at the list right now. There's Shroom Brewer.
You're not ripping
that
any
puts on a
taunt
little
minions,
pressure.
though.
Acidic Swamp Ooze, and that's really about it. But I mean, if you get a Giant, again, Greymane, and then one other minion.
Yeah, you could just win the game.
And there's only a couple
So
cards
what's more
left in the
likely,
deck.
that you find Gul'dan, next draw, or that you win the game with Army of the Dead?
Your magic shall not save you.
Oh, he's not even wanting to attack. He's just going for a Defile play.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think if he does this, he's saying, you know what, I draw Gul'dan next turn, or I'm Army of the Deading. I think that's what this play says.
Still, Eagle Horn Bow's 3
Eagle Horn Bow.
damage.
Cave Hydra could technically...
Ooh, that's a weak beast.
Yeah.
If you don't find a
strongest.
beast that can attack immediately, it's usually not very good.
I will say, though, Cave Hydra does have its merit sometimes. Not on this board state. You wouldn't be able to answer everything. But Cave Hydra is one of the most powerful beasts, I think.
Cave Hydra's
with a lot of its
phenomenal.
creations, exactly.
But you got to use it with, again, Stone Tusk Boar, Vicious Scale Hide.
I don't even think you can get it with Stone Tusk Boar, can you? Maybe you can. Is Stone Tusk Boar the first option or the second option?
No, you're right. I don't think you can. Boar's usually the first option.
It's
I think
difficult to tell sometimes.
Yeah, it's minions that have additional taglines, and then it's the more vanilla minions second.
Here's a Bone Mare. Bone Mare
Xixo's dead if he does an Army of the Dead into taunts. And he does not. That's going to be game.
That's game for Boarcontrol. I don't think there were any taunts left.
There weren't. That was a very, very close game number 2, but Boarcontrol is going to take the lead here. And that was a game that we thought Xixo should have a good chance of winning, especially after he stabilized in the mid game. But Deathstalker Rexar coming right on time for Boarcontrol, and Xixo just not quite able to get over the bump into being able to actually stabilize or end the game. That was a good game.
That was a really solid game. Played well from both players.
I'm trying to think if there were anything that Xixo could have done differently.
Maybe going for the Army of the Dead, hoping earlier might have been a potential line of play. But then even seeing the Eaglehorn bow there, you can't really go for that because there's no taunts left. Maybe if he went for it a little bit earlier and tried to out-pressure, that's a possibility.
The only other turn I see is if he could have played Army of the Dead the turn before. And again, we'd have to go back and look at the math and really calculate, what the secret was, what Xixo had on board, if it would have been enough. Regardless, Boarcontrol is going up to a 2-0 lead, and now we're going to see a mirror. It is Boarcontrol's Hunter up against Boarcontrol's Hunter.
It is a literal mirror.
Well, we'll see. We've got the deck lists in front of us. Are there any notable differences here?
There are 2 explosive traps in Boarcontrol's list, only 1 in Xixo's.
Yes, there's 2 snake traps in Xixo's, only 1 in Boar's.
I think that's honestly the only difference.
2 bows versus 1 bow.
Yes, that as well.
And then 2 bear shark versus 1 bear shark. So very minimal differences between the 2 lists here.
Both cap out at Mossy Har. And right now, what I will say though is one player has Spellstone, the other does not. And Spellstone is the most important card in this matchup.
It absolutely is.
Boarcontrol is just playing secrets to juice that up, just so he can play next turn and basically win the game on the spot.
This is definitely a matchup where being on the play is always a good thing with a more aggressive deck. Being on the coin in this matchup, when you can go secret, coin, Spellstone, it wins you the game. There's no response that a Hunter has to a fully powered Spellstone except their own Spellstone.
I mean, the most you can do is Explosive Trap into Explosive Trap, try and answer it a little bit, or Explosive Trap into something like Rexar. But as we can see right now, Xixo only has 1 Explosive Trap. That's not even a possibility. It would have to be like Wander.
Oh, okay
actually,
then.
Is one of them up right now, Explosive Trap?
Great question.
Link right now.
Well, we'll see if Xixo draws 2 of them.
No, because Xixo only runs 1 Explosive Trap and it's currently in the hand.
Okay. You're right, it's Boar that's got 2 of them.
And right now it's just a race at this point.
Kari Enchanter doesn't clear off any of these wolves. The Snake Trap might help. Actually, the Snake Trap will help a lot. That in combination with Deathstalker Rexar should let Xixo clear off this board. And then if he can start building some beasts, maybe he can get a favorable board. Although just looking at Boar's hand, he still has just a lot more minion pressure than Xixo does. And this early in the game, to be using the Build-A-Beast hero power every turn is pretty weak.
It's actually crazy to see that Boarcontrol had this powerful start with Spellstone. It actually kind of looks like he might slightly be a little bit behind. That's the craziest thing to me, because right now, Xixo can trade in the Subject 9, play out the Deathstalker Rexar, and full clear the board while
this is a good
having
turn.
his own board. Deathstalker Rexar is so powerful. I didn't realize how powerful it was in this matchup until seeing this
really
right here.
good. I mean, just like we were saying, most of the board is weak to Hellfire against a Warlock. Deathstalker Rexar plus the little incremental minions that you have on the board from the early stages, it does pretty much the same thing.
I guess that goes to show you how powerful. I mean, Subject 9 is just crazy. I didn't think it was going to be this powerful seeing it on launch. I thought it was going to maybe be a niche card, but
there's always those cards that the community unanimously sleeps on. Famously, Dr. Boom was one of those cards. Subject 9, I don't think is quite as powerful as Dr. Boom. It's certainly not as unanimously favorable in every deck, but This is a really, really good card in this deck in particular. And this is the first time in a very long time that we've seen a mid-range Hunter archetype be a tier 1 deck. It's been years.
It has been years. Xixo is kind of in the driver's seat at this point. You know, Boarcontrol had a decent start and a decent opener with that Spellstone. But right now, you know, Xixo is still at a healthy life total. Boarcontrol doesn't really have anything he's working it with. Whereas Xixo has that Build-A-Beast hero power, which although it is very slow, just having resources over your opponent in this matchup at this stage is what you want to have. And I believe Xixo's going to look for that Spellstone here. Does find it, can develop a secret, take a couple trades.
Got to keep up that pressure, and this is doing exactly that. We could be seeing a series where Hunter wins all 5 games. Granted, it would mean that Xixo would have to get the reverse sweep here, and he's still a long ways away from doing that. But it looks like he's at least getting off to a fair start.
I mean, that's one thing I was saying that Boarcontrol should be a little concerned about is although Boarcontrol is up to this great lead, this Hunter seems favorable against both of the other matchups. It's difficult to say because in the past, I would say Spell Hunter was really good against the Odd Rogue.
Play a Secret Boar. Do it. Do it. Play 2 of them.
In the past, I would say that Spell Hunter was typically favorable against Zulok and Odd Rogue, but that's because they had cards like Flanking Strike, they had cards, you know, like the Freezing Trap and 2 Wandering Monsters.
Yeah.
It may be a different story, though, because neither of these lists are running that Flanking Strike. Such a powerful card in those matchups. I think that's going to make a huge difference here.
That's saying a lot. One of the best cards in the Hunter class is not even being played in this deck because the secret package is so powerful. Freezing Trap up as well, I think.
Believe so.
So this beautiful, mighty 6 mana cost Secret Keeper that's actually only 1 mana. No, there was no Freezing Trap up. Xixo has it. It's going to remain on the board.
Primal
beautiful
Champion's really not the death rattle minion that I think Boarcontrol was looking for there. I'm not quite sure what would have helped out too much. I would say Chill Maw if you had a dragon in your hand, but
yeah.
That's out of rotation, and
Some good.
there's no dragons in the hand. Abomination doesn't really deal with the board. Although Abomination with the Explosive Trap would have actually dealt with the board.
Don't think Boarcontrol can come back from this board. Looks like Xixo is going to beat the Master with his own deck, and I think we're going to be going to game number 4. Xixo finally managing to get a little bit of leverage in this series. He's really struggled up until this point. But he definitely could swing things.
I think Boarcontrol right now has to play for the out of drawing into Rexar. I think you have to play the Explosive Trap, take the damage.
I agree.
Hope to draw Rexar. And if you draw Rexar, it's going to be a fun Build-A-Beast battle.
Huffer and Leok are lethal here. No, they're not, because it's Build-A-Beast instead of the Rexar hero power. I lied. Ignore me.
Ignored.
Thanks.
No problem. Oh,
It's 16
whoops, I was supposed
damage
to be ignoring you.
with Leok or Huffer.
It's a lot of damage.
It is. It's just not 18. Bloodworm is very good for
Yeah, if you ever get a
stabilizing
minion
in
with
the late.
Bloodworm onto the board, it's very powerful because it just lets you keep stabilizing with that life gain. Because Bloodworm, although not a very strong card on its own, if you can couple it with something like Tundra Rhino or just something very well statted that you can play on the following turn, either with, you know, Charge or Rush, something like that, it is very powerful, especially if it's something like, you know, Life Drink or Bloodworm.
I mean, there's definitely a reason why Bloodworm is as understated as it is. Lifesteal is a really powerful effect. But just taking a solid 5 mana cost beast. So Xixo's board is now weak to Deathstalker Rexar if Boarcontrol can hit it off the top.
Has to be Deathstalker Rexar here.
It is not.
That's not it.
Well fought.
All right, Xixo's going to take it. We're going to be going into game number 4. And like I said, I'd be a little scared if I was Boarcontrol right now. I don't know if these matchups are necessarily the worst for Boarcontrol, maybe that was part of the reason why Xixo was trying to hold it back, not only so he wouldn't get that mirror, but because, you know, he was a little worried about the other matchups and how they'd pan out. But I do say that, you know, if Hunter has that secret into Spellstone start with the Wandering Monster, the Snake Trap, or just, you know, Dire Maul and a Crackling Razor Maul into something, it can have very powerful turns that not a lot of decks can deal with.
Yeah, Boar's last 2 decks, he's got Odd Rogue and he has Zulok. Can be close. Looks like he's going to be going with that Rogue first. And Rogue absolutely can get on the board faster, but this Hunter deck with Dire Maul, with Crackling Razor Maw, can fight in the early couple of turns, which is, you know, Odd Rogue is a little bit not used to having Hunter do that nowadays, because most Hunters are playing Devilsaur Egg and Spider Bomb and not doing anything for the first 2 turns of the game, and that's really when Rogue thrives. Here we see, however, Xixo with a full keep on this hand. This is
it's a very
beautiful.
solid hand. I will say that the Secret Keeper was a consideration for not keeping because Boarcontrol is on the play, which means that he's going to play a 1-drop and then he's going to dagger. And Xixo is going to play the Secret Keeper into the 1-drop if he chooses to do so, which means it just dies to the dagger. So I wouldn't be surprised if he just holds it here in order to go next turn, Secret Keeper coin Snake Trap, in order to set up a better play, force 2 minions to go in, and then have all those 1/1s. I would not be surprised to see that being played here. And you see that's exactly what he's going for, understanding that if he played it on 1, it would just die to the dagger, and that's basically the card's useless at that point.
And Xixo does find another secret, so this is going to be a fully powered up Spellstone on turn 5. Rogue not famous for dealing AoE damage.
It's actually interesting for Boarcontrol right now. He has 2 potential 3-drops he could go for. Either want to get the Hench Clan Thug down as quickly as possible, or if he has some kind of read that, you know, it is Snake Trap or something like that, could just go for the Blood Knight here. And the Blood Knight is much more powerful onto the board.
So the Blood Knight and then the attack from the Argent Squire. Boarcontrol knows it's not Wandering Monster, knows it's not Explosive Trap. And I kind of like this race mentality from Boarcontrol. Even if the Secret Keeper gets nice and big, it's not going to beat Blood Knight and a Hench Clan Thug next turn. We could even see a Cold Blood from Boarcontrol if the Argent Squire were to live to try and clear up the Secret Keeper. Now with this Freezing Trap on board, however, things get difficult.
Yeah, it does get a little difficult. Going back to the previous turn, you might be questioning, why did Boarcontrol not just clear off the Secret Keeper? It looked like a prime trade. Well, Boarcontrol knows that Venom Strike Trap is in the deck. And so if he swings that Secret Keeper and it's a Venom Strike Trap, making that Blood Knight play becomes useless at that point. And you see here, he is still respecting it, saying, you know what?
Nice.
I'm not going to give you this free kill. I am going to keep going face. I'm going to end this game as quickly as possible. If I have to, I will Myra's on 5 just to draw my entire deck, just to put the race on. And I don't blame him.
This is consistent. This is consistent with what he did last turn. And I absolutely agree. He's not going to win this game by playing board control, because he knows that Spellstone can come down on 5 and he will not have enough of a board to deal with it.
They don't call him board control for nothing. He's not board control.
He controls that face.
He's board control. You know, the best kind of board control is putting your opponent to 0, because then they don't have a board.
Because they're dead.
Exactly. Is your mind blown right now?
That is some...
That's some deep knowledge.
You know what? Can you cross-stitch that onto a pillow for me?
I'm working on it. I have to get the rights to board control first.
Uh-huh.
You see here, Xixo's just got pretty awkward turn. He's going to have to go for this, maybe get a Leok or a Huffer. I think he's happy with either of those. The only unfortunate thing for Boarcontrol at this moment is I like the aggressive plays coming out from him, but he doesn't quite have a way to deal with this freezing trap.
No, he's going to try and stick this Blink Fox and then freeze it back for the next turn. Dagger can clear up the Leok here. Oh, no, still does not want to activate that Venom Strike Trap. And you know what? It makes sense. Then you wouldn't have anything to proc the freezing.
Exactly.
You lose the Blood Knight no matter what.
Boarcontrol's playing this really well.
It's just always so counterintuitive to not attack your opponent. To have powerful minions on board that can execute your game plan and to just not go for it. Like, for all that Boarcontrol knows, he could be playing around nothing or he could be playing around everything. But it's easier to just not find out. Until the moment, at least, that you're able to deal with it.
As you can see here, he's just respecting it so much. I mean, just making sure that, you know, he doesn't really proc those secrets in a bad way. And he's still pushing this damage phase. He picked up Leroy, which means it's going to make it that much quicker.
Leroy
just a
Dagger
couple
is
more
8
turns
damage
away.
burst. There's a kill command from Xixo, as well as 2 crackling Razor Maws. I mean, this could be a lot of damage himself. He does need to deal with this board immediately. And from then on, he could actually end the game pretty quickly.
Now Xixo, you saw Xixo earlier even respecting Boarcontrol's secrets. I think that's kind of funny that, you know, he ended up stealing one of the secrets and had to respect it himself.
Been playing around secrets,
yeah,
you know, 4 games now.
And we still see that last Venom Strike trap has still not been triggered.
Okay.
Or was it a snake trap? I'm starting to lose it at this point.
Xixo's playing 2 snakes? No, it's not a snake trap. One was procced earlier.
It's actually funny because Katharina will pull out Blink Fox from the
Yeah, it will.
And actually, if Xixo doesn't find some kind of taunt here, he's actually dead next turn.
There's taunt.
He has to take it because he would die to the combo of Leroy. And there's +3 health. He finds the 2 ones he needs.
Bor's gonna have to trade Leroy into that that Bear Shark now. Unless he finds Vile Spine Slayer.
That's not a Vile Spine. I mean, does he just go for Katharina to try and fight for board? It's actually great. It's actually technically good that he drew the Dire Mole, because then that's less likely to pull out a bad beast. Because there's actually a couple beasts.
Oh yeah, double Dire Mole, double Blink Fox.
Yeah, unfortunately he does get the Dire Mole.
Yeah, it's a 50-50 there. Nice job, Katharina. It's better than nothing. Maybe it draws 3 damage away from face.
I'm so used to that, seeing that pull out a Witchwood Grizzly. I was wondering why there was no Witchwood Grizzly on the board.
Excuse me, Judge, where's my King Crush?
Where's my King Crush?
I thought that's all that Katharina did.
How much damage is from Xixo? It is 17 right now, so just a little bit off default. Has to make some trades.
Baku's a beast!
Oh, and
Oh
Xixo,
my
I don't
God!
think he realized that.
Dude, that's so bad! Completely forgot that Baku the
completely
Moon Eater
forgot
is
it
a
was
beast.
too.
You never see it from
That's gonna be the
Deathstalker
game.
Rexar because only goes up to 5 mana, but that is going to be the game. Boarcontrol is going to win, and you know what? This is entirely something that Xixo could have avoided if he had just remembered that Baku the Moon Eater is not entirely useless when you have Katharina Winter Wisp on the board off of a Blink Fox. Odd Rogue is ridiculous, and Boarcontrol is going to take a 3-1 victory.
That was insane. I completely forgot it was a beast too. But I mean, honestly, could Xixo even play around that though? I mean, if he didn't get rid of Katharina,
Then
that would have been able to would have
South
been able
Sea
to
plus dagger
clear up
kills him.
the minion.
Yeah. There might have just not been anything for him to do there. I think that was just more surprise than anything else. Obviously,
think so was too.
Xixo doesn't know that Leroy Deckhand is in hand and that he's dead no matter what. If there's only one piece, or if there's, you know, God forbid for Boarcontrol, nothing in hand, then Xixo is absolutely correct there to kill off the Katharina.
I mean, I think
if there's no
either way.
big bad beast in the deck.
Because I think he has to either way, because if he does not kill off the Katharina, what happens is the Katharina value trades in, and then he knows Boarcontrol has been setting up this very aggressive play from the start of the game, and then Boarcontrol just ends the game on the next turn. So he has to set that play up. But Baku, I think this is the first time I've seen Baku end up, you know, winning the game for an Odd Rogue. A lot of times you have that in your hand, it's called big patches.
Yeah.
For a reason.
You don't want to draw it.
You don't want to draw it,
good.
but, you know, it came out of the deck and it looked really good. That was
It's
great.
a very good card. And, you know, we may not have seen Hunter win all of the games in that series, but Hunter cards were involved in all of the wins. So a really nice 3-1 victory for Boarcontrol. Very aggressive, showing a lot of prowess with that Hunter deck that he himself contributed to the build of quite a bit. And for Xixo, he's going to go to a 1-1 match record. We're only playing 4 rounds today because of time constraints, but tomorrow we will be playing the final 5 rounds of Swiss. So generally in a DreamHack tournament, there are 160-ish players here this weekend. It would require a 7-2 record to be very comfortable for that top 16 cut. So Xixo, by all means, not out of it just yet. Just going to need to maybe pick it up a little bit. But against an opponent as talented as Boarcontrol, I think that one isn't one that you really can get too lost in dwelling upon how you lost that one. A lot of those turns, other than maybe some of the Warlock game interactions, some of the plays there, I think were pretty cut and dry.
I think so as well. I mean, it just goes to show how powerful that Hunter deck is. I mean, that Hunter deck is one of the newer decks, I would say, that's coming out from this meta. It typically was in the past, it was that, Death Rattle Hunter. But as we can see now, bringing on this, Subject 9 Hunter, it's very powerful against a lot of the aggressive decks. And, it has some game against some control decks. Deathstalker Rexar in and of itself just is a card that can solo control decks if you build that right beast and you get it early enough. And then against the aggro matchups, you just have those very powerful secrets. But as we saw there, the secrets can be played around, and that's one of the most important things that a lot of these players are going to need to figure out on the floor if they want to beat that deck.
It's very skill testing to actually play against that Hunter deck because the secret suites are not identical between all of the decks. You certainly saw between Xixo and Boarcontrol some differences in the secrets that they were running. So you do need to be very adept at playing around them and understanding the interactions with all of those secrets. Does one proc when I hit face versus does it proc when I hit a minion? Can I afford to wait versus do I need to go face right now, deal with the repercussions of these secrets because I can't win the game any other way? It's actually not as easy to deal with as you might think, even though the Hunter deck tends to just play out its mana curve until you get to Deathstalker Rexar and things can get a little bit more complex then. But regardless, it's really nice to see Hunter back in a commanding position in the meta. For so long, Rexar was just not quite good enough. Deathstalker Rexar is incredibly powerful, but even then it was just, it couldn't live up to Gul'dan, it couldn't live up to Jaina. And now Big Spell Mage is sort of taking a back seat. We're not seeing Jaina nearly as much, and Rexar is having a little chance to shine. He's got his moment in the sun, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most important things with Rexar is that one of the most important decks right now is that Odd Warrior. And Odd Warrior is being brought just in full spades to this tournament. A lot of players see it as, that aggressive killer. And in a last hero standing lineup where you need something to get rid of those aggressive decks, especially because Zulok is one of the most popular decks right now, that Hunter kind of fits in there as well. You get that Deathstalker Rexar, and a lot of times that Warrior really can't do anything about it. You just keep building that beast turn after turn after turn. You keep just playing out those large minions, and eventually you just end the game with that.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter can go toe-to-toe against control, and it also has some pretty good tools for dealing with early aggro decks. Of course, it still can't heal. Of course, it still doesn't draw many cards outside of tracking and Subject 9, but, those are things that Rogue's been dealing with forever. If they don't play Gadgets and Auctioneer, they don't draw much, they don't heal much. And now Hunter's sort of finding a similar position in the meta. And that's cool to see. Certainly was very powerful there in that matchup. But we are going to be getting into our next matchup. It's going to be Xixo versus Fino. Xixo of Team Genji, Fino of Team Fade to Karma. So we actually now will have all three Fade to Karma team members up on the stage in our first couple rounds of the day. And both of these players very formidable. Xixo has had, I would say, more of an emergence in the last couple of months, but he's come to be very highly respected by the other members of the Hearthstone community. And Fino has had, I want to say, the best tour stop run of any player, the best DreamHack run of any player in particular this year. Several top 16 and top 8 finishes. Dude's on fire right now.
Yeah, no. Fino is definitely one to look out for. If you don't know who Fino is, you should definitely be hitting the books and figuring out who he is. And that goes to say with Xixo as well. I would say Xixo, I've gotten to personally talk to him, personally meet him a little bit. I was in HCT Taichung where he was going, and he was so close to getting his victory at HCT Taichung that it was almost heartbreaking to watch as he got second place. And I saw him after the game, and he was like, you know what? I had a lot of fun, but it wasn't my day. But he's definitely going to be gunning for this tournament because he is thirsty for that win, especially after second place. You got to know he wants it.
Very different personalities. Xixo is very soft-spoken, whereas Fino is very, very confident. So it's going to be interesting to see these two personalities go up against each other. Our second match will be underway right after this.